There are some faces that seem to perfectly capture a moment in time, an entire cultural ethos distilled into a single glance. For a generation that came of age in the early 1990s, this was one of them, Christopher Pettiet. If you were a kid navigating the hallways of junior high or high school as the world transitioned from the glossy 80s into the alternative 90s, you knew that smile. It was the smile of the cool older brother you wished you had, the charming rebel with a hidden heart of gold, the boy next door who was just a little bit dangerous in the most appealing way. He was the embodiment of a very specific pre-grunge, post-Brat Pack coolness. A little bit of surfer, a little bit of skater, a little bit of rock and roll, all wrapped in a disarmingly sweet package. In the summer of 1991, he seemed to be everywhere, the charismatic anchor of a beloved cult classic that would define countless slumber parties for years to come. He had the looks, the natural talent that leaped off the screen, and a seemingly limitless future stretching out before him. He was on the verge of becoming one of the defining young actors of his decade, a name to be uttered with the same reverence as River Phoenix or Christian Slater, but the promise of that sun-drenched summer, a promise that seemed as infinite as the California sky, would in time give way to a long and quiet shadow. The bright, hopeful image that was burned into the memory of millions would eventually be replaced by a story that ended in a small, silent apartment, far from the dazzling lights of Hollywood. This isn't just a story about where he went, or a simple tragic headline. It's a story about the road he traveled in the 9 short, tumultuous years between that iconic smile and his final day. It's an exploration of the immense, often invisible pressures of a system that creates idols overnight and offers little support when the pedestal crumbles. It's a story about the private battles fought when the cameras stop rolling and the applause fades. How did the boy who so perfectly embodied the effortless cool of his era, the kid who seemed to have the world at his feet, end up losing his footing so completely? The answer is a quiet tragedy, a profound cautionary tale, and a tribute to a bright, vibrant light that was extinguished far, far too soon. To understand Christopher Pettiet's rise, you have to transport yourself back to the unique cultural landscape of the early 1990s. It was a fascinating transitional era, a collective cultural exhale after the hyper-produced, materialistic, and often cynical decade of the 1980s. The slick synth-pop sound was being aggressively shouldered aside by the raw, distorted guitars of the grunge movement emerging from Seattle. The pristine, polished aesthetic of the previous decade was giving way to something more authentic, more lived in, and decidedly more angst-ridden. This wasn't just a change in music. It was a seismic shift in attitude that rippled through fashion, film, and television. Hollywood, always a mirror to the cultural mood, was reflecting this change. The teen movies of the era began to shift away from the polished, suburban angst of John Hughes's 80s classics. They became quirkier, more irreverent, populated by characters who were less concerned with prom and more with just getting by. The slacker archetype was being born. The heroes of these films were often outsiders, skaters, musicians, and lovable underachievers. This cultural shift created a demand for a new kind of teen idol. The clean-cut boy next door of the past still had a place, but the real currency was a specific blend of sensitivity and rebellion. The ideal young male star of the early 90s had to look like he listened to The Cure, but could also handle a skateboard. He needed to have a soulful, contemplative side, but with a flash of mischief in his eyes. This was the era of River Phoenix, whose vulnerability was his greatest strength, of Christian Slater, with his Nicholson-esque rebellious charm, and of a very young Leonardo DiCaprio, who was just beginning to showcase his immense raw talent. It was into this exact cultural moment that Christopher Pettiet, a charismatic and athletic kid from Texas with a head of perfect 90s hair and an innate, unforced coolness, was perfectly poised to step. He had the look, the vibe, and the talent that the era was actively searching for. He was born on February 12, 1976, in Dallas, Texas. By all accounts, he was an energetic, active kid, a natural athlete who excelled at sports, particularly snow skiing, which requires a combination of grace, fearlessness, and discipline. But alongside his athletic pursuits, a passion for performing began to blossom. His mother, Helen Pettiet, recognized his talent and became his steadfast champion. In a move that speaks volumes about their shared dedication, they began making the regular, grueling 16-hour drive from Dallas to Los Angeles for auditions. This was not a casual hobby. It was a serious commitment, a massive investment of time, energy, and faith in a dream that, for most, remains just that. It was during these formative years in Los Angeles that he began working with an acting coach named Kelly Williams. Williams, an actress herself, saw the raw talent in the young Texan and took him under her wing. Their relationship would evolve into one of the most significant and supportive of his life. She became more than a coach. She was a mentor, a guide through the treacherous waters of the industry, and eventually his manager. She was a foundational figure, a believer in his talent from the very beginning. His talent and look were undeniable, and small roles began to come in. He appeared in television commercials and had a guest spot on the hit crime drama Doogie Howser, MD, starring another famous former child actor, Neil Patrick Harris. But 1991 would be the year that the slow burn of his career ignited into a bonfire. It was a whirlwind, a perfect storm of opportunity and talent that saw him land not one, but three significant and culturally resonant roles that would launch him into the teen idol stratosphere and solidify his place as one of the most promising young actors in Hollywood. For the vast majority of people, Christopher Pettiet will forever be remembered as Zach Crandall, the dreamy, smooth-talking love interest from the 1991 dark comedy Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. The film, starring Christina Applegate as the resourceful teen Sue Ellen Crandall, was a clever and quirky story about a group of kids who are left to their own devices for the summer after their tyrannical elderly babysitter unexpectedly passes away. To survive, Sue Ellen lies her way into a high-powered job at a fashion company, while her siblings run wild at home. Pettiet played Zach, the charming, slightly older boy who works at a local fast food restaurant called Clown Dog. He becomes utterly smitten with Sue Ellen, completely unaware of the chaotic double life she is leading. His performance is the anchor that grounds the film's romantic subplot. It's a masterclass in natural charisma. He isn't just a one-dimensional hunk. He's funny, he's sweet, he's loyal, and he has a laid-back coolness that feels completely authentic and unforced. He delivers lines like, "I'm right on top of that, Rose," with a perfect blend of earnestness and slacker charm that defined the era. His chemistry with Applegate is palpable, making their budding romance believable and sweet. The film wasn't a massive box office blockbuster upon its release, but it found a second, more potent life on home video and cable television. It struck a deep chord with young audiences and, over the decades, has become a revered cult classic, a nostalgic touchstone for an entire generation. For countless young people who grew up watching it on repeat, Zach Crandall was the perfect boyfriend, and Christopher Pettiet became the face of that suburban fantasy. But 1991 wasn't done with him yet. In a testament to his rising profile, he also appeared in Kathryn Bigelow's iconic adrenaline-fueled action film, Point Break. It was a small but highly memorable role. He played the cocky young surfer, whose board is unceremoniously commandeered by Keanu Reeves's character, the undercover FBI agent Johnny Utah, during a frantic beach chase. In a film packed with the star power of Reeves and Patrick Swayze, Pettiet's brief, brash appearance still stood out. It further cemented his public image as part of the cool, authentic California surf and skate culture, even though he was a kid from Dallas. Being directed by a future Oscar winner like Bigelow and sharing a scene with Keanu Reeves at the height of his fame was a significant credit for a young actor. These two roles alone would have made for a banner year, but the biggest break was still to come. He landed a coveted role as a series regular on the popular ABC television series, The Young Riders. This was a monumental achievement for a 15-year-old. The series was a revisionist Western, a brat pack on horseback, which chronicled the adventures of a diverse group of young Pony Express riders in the volatile pre-Civil War American West. It was a high-profile show that had already launched the careers of other notable young actors like Stephen Baldwin and Josh Brolin. Pettiet was cast in the challenging role of a young Jesse James. This was not a fictional character. This was a legendary American outlaw. The show's premise was to portray these historical figures as they might have been in their youth. Pettiet's task was to embody the future infamous gunslinger as a spirited, intelligent, but deeply volatile teenager. The role was a significant step up in every way. It required a different, more serious set of skills: intensive horseback riding, working with period-specific dialogue and costumes, and finding the emotional depth to portray a complex historical figure. He had to convey the charisma and leadership that would one day make James a notorious gang leader, while also showing the vulnerability and turmoil of a young man finding his way in a violent world. For 2 seasons, from 1991 to 1992, Christopher Pettiet was a weekly presence in the homes of millions of Americans. He excelled in the role, holding his own alongside a large ensemble cast of talented actors. He proved he was more than just a charming face. He was a serious, capable, dramatic actor. This role solidified his status as a top-tier teen idol. His face adorned the pages of magazines like Tiger Beat, Bop, and 16 magazine with breathless articles about his hobbies, his favorite foods, and his views on romance. By the end of 1991, at just 15 years old, Christopher Pettiet had achieved a level of success and visibility that most actors work their entire lives for and never attain. He was on top of the world. The years that followed were a whirlwind of consistent work, a testament to his professionalism and talent. He was now a seasoned young actor, navigating the demanding world of network television production. He made memorable guest appearances on some of the biggest and most respected shows of the 1990s. In 1992, he appeared in an episode of Star Trek, The Next Generation, called The High Ground, where he delivered a moving performance as a young boy who is the sole survivor of a planetary terrorist attack. He also had roles on the global phenomenon Baywatch and the critically acclaimed Emmy-winning drama series Picket Fences. He was working, he was in demand, and he was honing his craft, proving he could handle both comedy and serious drama with equal skill. Life as a teen actor, however, is a strange and artificial existence. It's a pressure cooker disguised as a dream come true. It's a world of on-set tutors instead of a regular high school experience, of memorizing scripts and hitting marks instead of attending football games or going to the prom. It's a world of navigating adult pressures, financial complexities, and public scrutiny while still being a child. There is immense unspoken pressure to maintain the career momentum to land the next big role that will successfully bridge the gap from teen idol to serious adult actor. This is a notoriously difficult leap, a treacherous chasm in which many promising young careers have fallen. As the mid-90s progressed, Pettiet continued to work steadily, but the star-making roles became more elusive. The intense heat of his 1991 breakout began to cool, a natural and common trajectory for teen stars. He was growing up, his boyish looks maturing into those of a young man, and the industry, which often typecasts young actors, struggled to see him in new ways. He took roles in smaller independent films, such as the 1997 crime drama Against the Law, and what would be his final film, Boyhood's End, released in 2000. These roles showcased a more mature, developing actor, but they didn't have the mainstream visibility of his earlier work. It's a familiar and often cruel Hollywood story. The industry that builds you up as a child can be stunningly indifferent to you as an adult. It was during this challenging transitional period, a time of professional uncertainty and personal growth, that Christopher began to struggle with the demons that have haunted so many young people in the high-pressure environment of the entertainment industry. The precise timeline of Christopher's descent into addiction is not public record, and it's a story that ultimately belongs only to him and those who loved him. But it is known that in his later teenage years and early 20s, he began to struggle with substance abuse. This is not a unique or sensational story. For young people in Hollywood, the combination of financial independence at a young age, large amounts of unstructured time between jobs, the immense pressure of career uncertainty, and the easy access to drugs and alcohol can be a lethal cocktail. The very sensitivity and emotional availability that makes for a talented actor can also make one acutely vulnerable to the lure of self-medication as a way to cope with anxiety, depression, or the sting of professional disappointment. His struggle was not a secret to those closest to him. His longtime manager and mentor, Kelly Williams, the woman who had been with him since the beginning, saw the dangerous path he was on and fought desperately to save him. She spoke publicly and movingly after his death about her efforts, a painful testament to her deep love for the young man she had helped guide and protect for so long. She described him as a wonderful, wonderful boy and detailed her numerous attempts to get him into rehabilitation programs and to provide him with the professional support he so clearly needed. Her words paint a heartbreaking picture, not of neglect or ignorance, but of a fierce, loving, and ultimately exhausting battle against the insidious and powerful disease of addiction. It's a battle that, tragically, she and Christopher would ultimately lose. It is crucial to frame his story not as a moral failing, but as a struggle with a powerful and recognized medical illness. The charming, energetic, professional young man seen on screen was not a facade. That was the real Chris. But he was also fighting a disease that was slowly hijacking his brain chemistry and his life, a disease that thrives in isolation and is fueled by shame and guilt. For a young man who'd been publicly defined by his success and his cool, confident image, admitting the depth of his struggle and accepting help would have been an immense, perhaps insurmountable, challenge. He was trapped between the person he was and the person the world expected him to be. On April 12, 2000, Christopher Pettiet was found dead in his apartment in Los Angeles. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office ruled the cause of death as an accidental overdose of multiple drugs. He was just 24 years old. The news sent a quiet shockwave through those who remembered him as the vibrant, smiling kid from their favorite 90s movies. There was no major sensationalized media frenzy that often accompanies the death of a celebrity. His death was a quiet, sad end to a career that had once been so loud with promise. The boy who had seemed to have everything had died with very little, a tragic victim of a disease that has claimed far too many young, talented people, both in and out of the spotlight. In the wake of such a profound tragedy, it is a natural human impulse to look for someone or something to blame. The most relevant and enduring controversy surrounding Christopher Pettiet's death is not one of personal scandal, but one of systemic failure. His story forces us to ask difficult questions about the entertainment industry's moral and ethical responsibility to the young lives it employs and profits from. In the 1990s, and still to a large extent today, there were few, if any, robust psychological support systems in place for child actors. They are often treated as miniature adults, expected to handle adult levels of fame, rejection, and financial pressure with little to no guidance. When their careers inevitably stall, as most do when they enter the awkward transition to adulthood, they are often left adrift. Without the tools to cope with a return to a normal life, they never really had a chance to lead. Christopher's story is a tragic and powerful case study in this phenomenon. He was not an anomaly. He is part of a heartbreaking fraternity of talented young actors from that same era, like River Phoenix, Jonathan Brandis, Brad Renfro, and Corey Haim, who shone brightly for a time before being consumed by the immense pressures of their environment and the devastating disease of addiction. The historical debate, then, is not about individual bad choices. It is about whether these are simply a collection of individual tragedies or damning evidence of a fundamental flaw in an industry that profits from the magic and vulnerability of youth, but too often fails to protect the young people who create it. The most immediate and painful consequences of Christopher's death are felt by the family and friends who loved him and lost him. But his story also has a broader historical significance. He remains a powerful and poignant cautionary tale about the perils of early fame and the dark side of the dream factory. His life is a stark reminder that behind the glossy, smiling image of a teen idol is a real person, a vulnerable human being susceptible to the same struggles and illnesses as anyone else, but forced to navigate them under the intense and often unforgiving glare of the public eye. But Christopher Pettiet's legacy does not end in tragedy. It was vital to his manager and friend, Kelly Williams, that his death not be in vain, that his life have a meaning that extended beyond his final tragic chapter. In a beautiful and moving tribute to the young man she had mentored, she established the Christopher Pettiet Scholarship Fund at Center Stage, LA, an acting school where he had once studied and honed his craft. The fund was created with a simple, powerful mission to help other young, aspiring actors pursue their dreams. It provides financial assistance to talented students who might not otherwise be able to afford the high cost of professional acting training. This single act transformed a story of loss into one of hope and continuity. It ensured that Christopher's name would be associated not just with his tragic end, but with the positive, life-affirming act of helping the next generation. It is a legacy of support, a recognition of the genuine passion for the craft of acting that was at the core of who he was. The Scholarship Fund is the light that continues to shine from his extinguished flame, a testament to the love and respect he inspired in those who knew him best, and a small but meaningful attempt to fix a small piece of the system that had failed him. His story is not a simple morality play. It is the complex and heartbreaking story of a bright talent and a good heart, a young man who was overwhelmed by a devastating illness in an environment that was and largely remains ill-equipped to save him. He was a son, a friend, a beloved actor whose work continues to bring joy to those who grew up watching him and are now discovering him for the first time. And through the scholarship established in his name, his spirit continues to support the dreams of young actors today. He was more than a cautionary tale. He was Christopher Pettiet, and for a short, bright, unforgettable time, he was magic.